Morning, this is Tom Vander Ark. We're talking with Tim Hilborn from Trekka this morning. Morning, Tim.
Good morning, Tom.
Tim, I've had the good fortune to work with you in a superintendent's academy, and I was really impressed that you really appreciate the learner experience. You think a lot about it, and I'd like to spend 10 minutes talking about that today. Where did your interest in adult learning come from?
I'm going to have to tell you that there were several key stakeholders in my development that I just have been lucky. I've been in the right place at the right time to be introduced to the right people. I began my career at Highland, which is where I spent 29 out of my 30 years in the public education and as a middle school science teacher. And I was the union president ultimately and negotiated those kind of things, and through those processes knew that I wanted to grow up to be a principal. And so one day I was given the opportunity to be the principal. My first task was to recreate the teacher evaluation system. And so we convened a meeting, and of course, just coming from the union, I had a little bit of credibility with the leaders, the teacher leaders. So we sat down and we started to describe what good teaching was. And as the good Lord works things, I walked back to my principal's office that day, and Charlotte Danielson's book happened to show up, and we took the framework to the next meeting. That night I ordered the books, and that began a process of us agreeing upon, for the first time, what good teaching would look like and what we were going to do for people that didn't necessarily meet or understand what excellence was.
Yeah.
And after that, I received an invitation to meet with Rick Dufour and PLCs and how to create professional learning communities. I was involved in a year-long process with him. We met quarterly. There were several young principals that were involved. And ultimately, a year later, he came back and asked us, okay, show me what you've done. And he and I were at lunch one day eating during one of these sessions, and he dug a little deeper and ultimately invited me to go to Lincolnshire to present at his conference up there at Lincolnshire with professional learning communities around the structure about how I taught teachers. Similar question, Tom. It's very interesting to me that you asked it. And so once we had identified Charlotte Danielson's what is good teaching, and we learned how to meet together in professional learning communities, and we accepted the challenge that if we knew our students were not scoring very high, and by the way, that was a huge motivator for me. Our state grade card said, "You stink." And I wasn't willing to live with that. I knew we were better than that. And ultimately, we went from "you stink" to 29 out of 29 on the grade card, where we had great success because we focused on the learner, and we have focused on the learners leading learning. And I can't go on without saying that I put a lot of credit or credibility in Bob Marzano's work. I liked the meta data analysis that he would provide and break it down to some very clear steps you could take to improve teaching and learning. I do believe you can become a better teacher, and so that was my beginning into the adult learning processes and the foundational pieces that helped me to kind of get where I am today. One other piece that happened. Governor Taft in Ohio had started a group where he wanted to work on providing advice to the legislature about creating good teachers in the state of Ohio. And he held a little talk up at one of the local universities, and our board president said, "Come on, you're going with me." And I said, "No, I don't have time for that. I'm working on some other things." And he said, "Come on." This is when I became a young superintendent anyway. It was in my first couple of years as a superintendent. And I went to this, and finally Governor Taft had pushed my limit, and I finally raised my hand. And I said, "Sir, without investing in the teachers that we currently have in place, your ideas for how to change the teaching profession aren't going to happen, because 90% of the profession has already learned how to teach a certain way and learned how to learn a certain way, and until you invest in reteaching them how to teach and learn a different way, you're not going to see the kind of changes you're talking about here. And so I got put on a state level committee then and got to go down to Columbus and really work on learning more about what opportunities were out there for different kinds of professional learning opportunities. So those are the kind of the core pieces behind it.
So I want to just recap some of those early influences because I think they're really interesting. One, that you were motivated by better performance. You knew you could do better for kids. Two, you used Marzano's framework to put that data to use. Three, you had a shared picture of what great teaching looked like from Charlotte Danielson. And four, you used the structure of professional learning communities from the Solution Tree guys. So those are really great early influences. You're now putting those to work in a superintendent network for TRECA. Where did the idea for that come from?
I give all the credit to our CEO, Mike Carter. I had showed you back when we were at the INICL conference, we were talking about the R&D projects that I had going on in the state of Ohio. I had 15 R&D projects. He had a vision, and I'll tell you this vision based on, you'll laugh at this, but he used to take groups of people similar to our group that went to Boston to Cupertino. However, there were no accountability structures. There were no support structures once they got back. There were no goal setting. There was no vision setting. And his cost-benefit analysis, he and I had a conversation. He said, Tim, I take them out there, but I'm not seeing any change in the classroom. So they're exposed to all these Apple products and the best learning Apple has to offer, but yet I'm not seeing change in the classroom. He goes, and we were talking about the R&D projects that we had going on, and I talked to him about the lack of understanding that the principals had for supporting the R&D projects, that the teachers that I had were not being supported the way they needed to be supported to grow it to another level. So he and I, through our discussions, he said, why don't you create a year-long lesson or class for leadership so that they can learn how to support these teachers that are moving into this direction.
That's great. And in the 3 days that I was with you in Boston, I saw about 4 different settings and probably 12 different strategies. I mean, you've really developed quite a kind of a toolkit for adult learning. Where did that come from?
You may have seen in the little email you sent me that I kind of changed it away from me and put the emphasis on the TRECA professional development team. Through work with that professional development team, those people are, I've told you, are Apple professional development specialists, but when they're not doing that, then they work in the classroom with teachers. They ultimately understand adult learning much better than I did, so I could go to them based upon the resources I had, based upon the knowledge I had, based upon the experiences I had, and I could tell them, this is the package I want to deliver to superintendents with the attention span this long. I want to take them to the edge of wanting more and drop them repeatedly with multiple pedagogies that they can use in their world, but I want them to be teased just to the edge of wanting more so that they have to dig out more. And so the 5 people that you saw presenting, Natalie and Jen, there's Matt was there really as technical support, but he was part of our design team, and Josie and another person, Tad, who's our professional development. He's our director of professional development. He constantly kept me focused on what's your goal for this session, what's your goal for this session, what's your goal for this session. So their experience with adult learning was invaluable in pulling this off. Some of the keys that you were trying to weave into each of those, let's recap what those were. So you were really clear about a particular learning objective. Yes. What are the other design principles that are real priority for you? In every session, we wanted to grow their idea around what, and Monday and Tuesday were what are next generation learning environments. Right. So we wanted them by the end of Tuesday, and what the real purpose of Chopped was, could they identify what a next generation learning environment was to them? That was our formative assessment. Right. So we kind of got to measure where they were at. You want them to wrestle enough with a
a next-gen environment that they really internalize the design principles, right?
Exactly. And then they had to start to build in their mind, in their world, where am I going to take this next? Where am I going to take this next? And it was interesting to watch their confidence grow through the week. And I'm not talking about exceptional, world-shattering, innovative work. I'm talking about grassroots, fundamental belief that I can do this and we can do this. They went from I can't afford this to they went from the I can'ts to the I cans with confidence. That's what I'm most proud about the week. And I didn't care where they ultimately ended up this week. I knew that the real growth was going to come over time.
You on the third day, you dropped them, the superintendents, into a classroom. What was that about?
Well, I'm gonna begin with the end in mind. That classroom had 14 different sessions in it, and the ultimate compliment came when I watched Bruce Gast, who's a superintendent at Elgin, that has zero technological or understanding skills about what a next generation learning environment. He was as far to the left as I could have said in our group about understanding where we wanted to go. But Tom, for 2 hours and a half, Bruce Gast did not know anyone else was in the room. He was so immersed in his own learning from station to station to station. He was taking copious notes, interacting in a very positive way with learning so much. He busted his tail engagement-wise. If you want a definition of engagement, that was the definition of engagement. For 2 hours and a half, Bruce Gast did not know anyone else was in the room other than the fact that they were there to help him with his learning. Yeah. Now, other superintendents were very engaged, don't get me wrong. And probably the highlight of the group was the Google chat. Once they looked at the iBooks for the R&D projects, they could go have a Google chat with the 5 teachers that had iBooks. Yeah. And that proved to be very, very valuable and helped them move their understanding from I can't to I can.
Yeah, that was really a cool idea, that using the iBooks for as sort of a flipped classroom setting, and then having the Hangout set up with teachers for real-time chats. That was very cool. Superintendents can be tough to work with. They're more eager to share what's working than what they're really struggling with. And sort of, in closing thoughts, how would you advise people trying to promote superintendent learning?
Well, 2 things. First of all, Tom, did you get the email I sent you that included their web of really putting down and putting on paper where their roadblocks were going to be? One of the things I didn't tell you, that after they completed those webs, they spent 5 minutes telling a group, here's what I wrote down, here's my #1 problem, here's my #2 problem, and then we sent them out of the room to do their Ed 2 talk, and the group then got to put suggestions on their paper for how to move forward. And so they had to articulate, here's what I want to do, here are the roadblocks I see. So to me, part of the whole structure of accountability, Tom Vander Ark is part of that at a national level. We have state level people, and now they've made a local commitment to and as we move forward, to a leadership team and to their principals of a goal that they have envisioned. When we meet next Friday, August 1st, with their leadership team to start for them to share their story with their leadership team, the process begins for teaching the whole school district for how we're going to move forward around next generation and personalized learning.
Yeah, Tim,
it's the accountability piece at multiple levels. They can't hide from it, and if they do, they're going to be exposed.
Tim Hilborn from Trucka, I appreciate how you and your team sweat the learner experience for adult learners. You guys do a great job of framing the opportunity of building an inviting, active, and supportive learning environment for adults, and it's been fun to be part of that. We appreciate your time this morning.
All right, thanks, Tom.